Hello, new philosophy students. My name is Matthew Elam, and I work for the Office of Student Success and Retention here at Saint Vincent College. I'm an academic advisor and a professional tutor in that office. And the subject that I find myself spending more and more time with students on is philosophy. So Dr. Crom and I have put together this video as a primer to your studies in first philosophy that you will take this semester. Philosophy is not likely one of the subjects that you've had much experience with, if you've had any at all. And as such, some of the skills and ideas that you will encounter there will be entirely new. Since philosophy is literally translated a love of wisdom, it should come as no surprise that critical thinking and logic will be essential to your exploration of the field. One of the most fundamental logical tools that you must understand is syllogism. So we're going to take a look at that together. So what is a syllogism? You may have heard this bounced around before, but maybe not seen any examples. But a syllogism is a simplified version of an argument. It's a summary of sorts that represents the foundations of an argument in an essay, or within an essay, or some kind of any kind of form of argument into an easy to dissect format. Aristotle, one of the thinkers that you will undoubtedly read in your studies, was the first that we know of to lay out the structure and types of syllogisms. This was about between 300 and 400 BCE. And since then, this form has been used to construct and deconstruct logical arguments. As a first philosophy student, you will be expected to learn how to use syllogisms to respond to the texts that you will read in class. This video will be a short introduction to syllogistic thinking and the models that will be useful to you throughout the semester. The diagrams and syllogisms in this presentation were sourced from a handout created by Dr. Crom for his first philosophy students, and they provide a thorough introduction to the format. So let's look at this together. Before we get into actual examples of syllogisms, we need to define a few terms. So every syllogism has the following three parts: a major premise, a minor premise, and a conclusion. The major and minor premises constitute the logical path toward the conclusion, which, if the syllogism is valid, necessarily follows from those premises. And each statement within a syllogism is a proposition. It's a declarative sentence about a subject. So like you may remember, or should remember from grade school, is that every sentence contains a subject and a predicate. And without one of those things, it is an incomplete sentence. The same thing goes for a proposition. You need something for the statement to be about, and then that's the subject, and then the predicate, which is the claim about that subject. Let's take a look at a couple of examples of propositions. So these are the kinds of statements you will see within syllogisms. The first of which is Socrates is a man. Socrates being the subject and is a man being the predicate, which describes Socrates. The second example here is Bearcats study less than they should. Bearcats being the subject and less than they should, or study less than they should, being the predicate. And that is the claim about Bearcats. The object of a syllogism is to pair together statements such as these so that we can form a conclusion that logically follows from the premises. We do that by linking parts of the first two statements, these propositions, the major and minor premises, together into a conclusion, a single statement at the end. The part of our premises that becomes the subject of our conclusion is known as the minor term. The part that becomes the predicate to our conclusion is the major term. So what you're actually doing is you're taking the subject from one of these premises and the predicate from another one of these premises, or a combination of those, maybe both predicates or both subjects, something, and you're connecting them together within a statement in the conclusion. And it has to logically follow from the two premises. The parts of the premises that don't make it into the conclusion, while they are still important, are called the middle term, and you won't see them in the conclusion. Let's take a look at a couple of examples here for some clarification, because this will become clearer as we look through some of the examples. In case one, we begin with the major premise: all who love wisdom are honorable. The subject of this premise is all who love wisdom. Our predicate or claim about this group is are honorable. Since this is the major premise, we know that our conclusion will contain some part of this statement within it as its predicate. Our minor premise is the proposition: those who are honorable are in honor's first philosophy. The subject of this premise is those who are honorable. Our predicate is are in honor's first philosophy. Because this is the minor premise, we know that our conclusion will contain some part of this sentence as its subject. Okay, so if we look at the diagram here, we see that the middle term encompasses all of these parts. Okay, that's because the categories that we describe with the all who love wisdom and are in honor's first philosophy are all contained within the group of people who are honorable. See, all who love wisdom are honorable, and those who are honorable are in honor's first philosophy. So this middle term actually contains both the major and minor terms. And that's what we see here. What this syllogism has done is, as we go down our premises and get to the conclusion, we are just narrowing down certain individuals within the larger group, or certain details about the individuals within this group. And so it becomes smaller and smaller until we get to that final statement: those who are in honor's first philosophy love wisdom. Okay. The conclusion that we draw from the premises is, therefore, those who are in honor's first philosophy love wisdom. It takes the predicate of the minor premise, are in honor's first philosophy, as its subject. And the subject of the major premise becomes the predicate of the conclusion. It's the all who love wisdom. By constructing the conclusion from the parts of the premises, we have a better chance of having a valid syllogism. We will discuss what valid means in a few moments, but first let's take a look at a couple more examples of syllogisms. So example 2A, is as follows: no bearcats cheat. All lovers of wisdom are bearcats, therefore all lovers of wisdom do not cheat. Our minor premise, the one that contains the subject of our conclusion, is premise 2. All lovers of wisdom are bearcats. The major premise then is the first, because it contains the predicate of our conclusion, cheating. We see that in the diagram here, that the major term is cheating, and the no part of this sentence excludes bearcats from that group. So we have our middle term, bearcats, being excluded entirely from the major term, cheating. And the minor term, which becomes our subject in the conclusion, is contained within the group of bearcats. All lovers of wisdom are bearcats. So since these two have some overlap, and that overlap is going to become important, we can draw the conclusion that lovers of wisdom do not cheat. So it is a valid syllogism. So let's look at another example of this kind of syllogism, where one group is excluded from the others. Example 2B starts with honorable students are lovers of wisdom. Continues with non-philosophy majors are not lovers of wisdom. So we have an exclusionary word there, not. And so then we conclude that non-philosophy majors are not lovers of wisdom. I'm sorry, non-philosophy majors are not honorable students. I misspoke there. Our major term here, the predicate of the conclusion, is are not honorable students. That comes from the first premise. Okay, so that first premise is going to be our major term yet again. Our minor term, the subject, non-philosophy majors, comes from the second premise. And again, we can see here in the diagram that the middle term, lovers of wisdom, which appears in both of these premises, contains honorable students, because we say honorable students are lovers of wisdom. So it's like saying all squares are rectangles, because mathematically and by definition, squares are rectangles. But not all rectangles are squares. So we can sort of look at it from two different perspectives, depending on what our subject is. But in this case, honorable students are lovers of wisdom. Non-philosophy majors are not lovers of wisdom. Okay, so we have lovers of wisdom, and then we have non-philosophy majors over here, the minor term, which becomes our subject of the conclusion. So now, since we know where these categories of people stand in relation to each other, we can form a conclusion. So non-philosophy majors are not contained within the major term, honorable students. So non-philosophy majors are not honorable students. These diagrams are very helpful in visualizing the connections between these statements. And I thank Dr. Crom for making these. The last one that we're going to talk about is an interesting one, because it is one that does not logically work. We can make no logical conclusion from these statements, but let's take a look at why. The first premise, no wise students are philosophy majors, has some connection to the second one, no philosophy majors are astronauts, through the middle term, philosophy majors. Philosophy majors, they appear in each statement. But no conclusion can be drawn from this, because there's no connection between the wise students and the astronauts. Each group, as shown in the diagram, is completely separate from each other, because we have two statements that contain an exclusionary word, no. So no wise students are philosophy majors. Okay, so we put wise students outside of philosophy majors. Okay. We also have astronauts not being philosophy majors as well. So we have to put astronauts outside of philosophy majors. Well, there's no overlap logically here between wise students and astronauts, or between any of these categories. And so since there's no overlap, because there's no, the categories of people don't intersect at any point, we can't form any logical conclusions. That overlap is missing here. So that brings us to the subject of validity and soundness. Okay? So a valid syllogism is one in which the conclusion follows of necessity from the premises. That just means that the premises are connected in a way that they can be used to make a statement about one of the group's mentions that combines elements from both premises. And that was the overlap that was missing from example 3. Sound syllogisms are those which are valid, but also contain true premises. You can have a valid syllogism that is untrue and therefore unsound. The example here provided by Dr. Crom is as follows. Minor premise, bearcats are strong. Major premise, strong people write well. The conclusion is, therefore, bearcats write well. Okay, so it's valid if we follow the logic behind the premises, we can come to that conclusion. The problem here is that even though those premises are logically connected, meaning that there is some overlap, but the second premise is not a true statement, because there is no real world correlation between strength and writing ability. So the whole syllogism becomes unsound because one of the premises is untrue. To better understand how premises might be linked and therefore see how we can evaluate their validity, we must now understand the 3 types of syllogisms. So the syllogisms that we've seen so far are the categorical syllogisms. These are formed from simple statements that are logically connected to each other, usually to do with how the topics are defined and related. And basically, we are speaking about groups of people or subjects in order to make a claim about the whole category. The second type of syllogism is a hypothetical syllogism, and we haven't seen an example of this until this point. This is really an if-then statement. So the major premise is, in this example here, if I believe in dinosaurs, they believe in me. So that's an if-then statement. The minor premise is I believe in dinosaurs. So therefore, I can come to the conclusion that they believe in me. Dinosaurs believe in me. If one thing is true, then the other one must be true. Logically, this argument is valid because the major premise sets up the conditions for the conclusion, and the minor premise satisfies those conditions. This is not, however, a sound syllogism or sound argument because the major premise is untrue. Dinosaurs, because they are extinct and have nothing to do with the speaker, cannot believe in the speaker. So there can be no, this cannot be a true statement, even though it is logical. It's valid, but not sound. The third type of syllogism is the disjunctive syllogism, which is a fancy word for an either-or statement. The example here that we see is either I attend class or I do not behave logically. Again, we're setting up an either-or sort of, we're setting up a condition, okay? Minor premise is I do not behave logically. Okay, so now we have satisfied part of those conditions, and so we can draw a conclusion. Because I do not behave logically, I therefore do not attend class. The argument is valid, again, because the major premise sets up the conditions that the minor premise satisfies. The syllogism is also sound because the illogical student really would not attend class. Now, it could be disproven by attacking the idea that no illogical students attend class, and that brings us to our final subject, building counterarguments. At first, you may be tempted to start directly for an argument's conclusion to disprove the syllogism, but that would not lead to a good counterargument. You must instead disprove their conclusion by attacking one or both of the premises. Doing so will tear the foundations from their argument. So let's look at this example argument. So this is the one that we want to tear down. The minor premise is everything that is pleasant is good. Major premise, whatever is good makes one happy. So now we see a little bit of overlap there. Conclusion follows, therefore, everything that is pleasant makes one happy. So it's a valid argument, but let's see how we might be able to attack this. So one way to do that is to address the major premise, which says that everything pleasant is good. But how would we do that? Well, we would provide an example of something that is both pleasant and not good. And we see that here in this counterargument. The minor premise is a poisoned milkshake is pleasant. So that's a pleasant thing. Our major premise is a poisoned milkshake is not good. So now we've given something that is both pleasant and not good. Therefore, the conclusion follows that not everything that is pleasant or good. I'm sorry, not everything that is pleasant is good. And it was as simple as that. All that it took to tear down that argument was to attack one of the premises. And you can attack either premise. There will undoubtedly be more than one way to attack every argument. So be creative with it. But once you know how these are formed, once you can put an argument into a syllogistic form, it becomes more clear where you might find the weaknesses. Logic, as cold and calculating as it can be, presents the opportunity to exercise our reasoning abilities in sometimes surprising ways, creative ways, and can help us see through incorrect statements and even deception. It's a tool that you will be able to use in your everyday life, in every subject and every field, and that's why we are focusing so much on it. And I hope that this primer has been helpful to you or will be helpful to you in your study of philosophy. Remember though, you always have people that can help you if you get stuck. You have tutors and professors, and you shouldn't be afraid to admit that you are having some trouble. The best reasoners learn to be so from constant practice, repeated failures, and help from others. So please, if this video was not enough to help you through syllogisms, take your syllogisms to a tutor or ask your professor. Even if you feel that this video was thorough enough, please continue to seek further clarification from the people who have been doing this for quite some time, especially your professors. Um, and you will find that sometimes the readings can be a little dense too in philosophy, and that can become a stumbling block if you're not used to reading things like Platonic dialogues. Those could be very, very tricky, especially when you're first starting out. So please, please, please seek help as much as you can. Take your time with the readings. Give yourself time enough to read them twice and to read them slowly. And again, even if that isn't enough, you have tutors, you have philosophy professors who are experts in this field, who can help you understand these things. So reach out to everybody you can. And I hope that on this journey through philosophy, you will not only learn a lot, but have some fun, and maybe open your eyes to the things you may have not noticed before. Thank you for listening to this video or watching this video, and I hope to see you all around campus very soon. Thank you.